The argument then that Dawkins is giving seems to be something like the following. We, uh, or you Christians, um, have tried to argue for the existence of God on the basis of biological design. And that was a fairly compelling argument until Charles Darwin came along and closed that gap. So you retreated to physical design, and I really hope that someday, says Dawkins, that perhaps physicists will be able to close that gap as well, and therefore there is no room left for God. Well, the problem with that again is that if what what if I wanted to take an existential leap of faith as I encounter God in Scripture? That's not appealing to nature. It's appealing to religious experience. So I think that if we take the fine-tuning argument as the God of the gaps argument, uh, then what Dawkins is saying will refute the fine-tuning argument at best. That's the best it can do. But it does not say positively there is no God, or there probably is no God. And the whole God of the gaps fallacy allegation is itself fallacious. I don't think I know any uh, Christians or other theists today who would use that kind of a fallacy. It's a straw man. It may be the case, I'm not saying it was, but it may have been the case amongst the Greco-Roman polytheists back in the days of Socrates, that they had God of the gaps kind of reasoning. But people today, um, it's the only place that I find God of the gaps arguments is in people uh, arguing against religion, in the words that they put into the mouths of Christians. So, but at any rate, the argument that Dawkins gives in the God delusion, uh, if we think of it as a deductive, uh, formal deductive argument, it's got faulty premises, and the conclusion does not follow logically, uh, validly from the premises, which aren't even true to begin with. So some of them are more true than others, but taken as a whole, there are definitely some that we would have to disagree with, as I've said. Well, here it is. Let's kind of switch gears here. Um, so, a really bad argument from Dawkins. Um, God probably doesn't exist, he says, and he gives the reasons, which isn't very good, and it's unsound and invalid both. And the conclusion, if it were a good argument that we could draw, is that science has proven there is no God, therefore belief in God and science are incompatible. But Francis Collins has a different viewpoint. Now he argues uh, with various lines of argumentation. Um, I think his main argument is the axiological argument, um, which, as William Lane Craig expresses it, if God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist. Premise 2, objective moral values do exist. And conclusion by modus tollens, therefore God exists. Now that's not quite how Collins words it in the language of God, but that's essentially what his argument is. And he has other arguments as well. So there's multiple arguments that he gives, which I think are valid and sound for the existence of God. And then he gives a condition, a hypothetical, um, well, a series of hypothetical syllogisms. He says the argument would go something like this. If God exists, then he is supernatural. If he is supernatural, then he is not limited by natural laws. If he is not limited by natural laws, there is no reason he should be limited by time. If he is not limited by time, then he is in the past, the present, and the future. And I would qualify that last conditional premise as um, he is in the past, present, and future from our perspective, because we've already seen that he is not limited by time. So I think all of these premises are true. Um, if God exists, then he is supernatural. Certainly, if he's a say an alien, then he would be not God but an alien. So God is supernatural if he exists, and the supernatural is not limited by the natural. That certainly seems fairly obvious to me, at least. If he is not limited by natural laws, there is no reason he should be limited by time. Time is simply one facet of nature. So if you're not limited by nature, you're not limited a fortiori by time. So all this is quite straightforward. If he is not limited by time, then he is, from our point of view, in the past, present, and the future. So when we experience the past, he was there. When we experience the present, as we are right now, God is with us. And when we experience the future, we perceive God with us. Um, so even if we don't perceive God, we can at least say that if he exists and is not limited by time, then he is in our past, in our present, and in our future. Okay, so this is a chain of propositions. If P then Q, and if Q then R, therefore if P then R. And then when we add in the affirmation of P, namely the existence of God, based on the axiological argument, etc., we conclude that God is in the past, the present, and the future. Okay, so so far so good. That's a valid, sound argument that Collins is making here. Then he says the consequence of those conclusions. So it's not just the final conclusion that he's in the past, present, and future, but all of the whole chain of the all the propositions in the chain of hypothetical syllogisms here. It says the consequence of those conclusions would include he could exist before the Big Bang, and he could exist after the universe fades away, if it ever does. So if God is not limited by time, and he's not, we've proven that, or Collins has, then certainly he would be able to exist before time begins. Now, he's not very precise here because before the beginning of time, we can't speak temporally. We can't say he exists before the Big Bang. So strictly speaking, that's not true. But the idea that he's getting at in a somewhat imprecise way is certainly true. At the moment of the Big Bang, God was already there. Before, in other words, is in quotation marks. It's not in here in the book, but it should be to be more technically accurate. And it's true. God he would exist prior to the Big Bang, so he can be the explanation of the Big Bang. The second conclusion, God could know the precise outcome of the formation of the universe even before it started. Again, if we remember that there are these quotes around before, we can agree with this. God uh, uh, would be able to know. Um, I suppose we probably have to argue for omniscience at this point, perhaps, to be complete, but without being too anal about it, uh, it's at least possible that he would know the precise outcome um, of the formation of the universe even before it started. So, whatever state the universe is in right now, um, including all the different species and human beings and the fine tuning and everything else, he could have known all that in advance, and indeed he did. The third conclusion, he could have foreknowledge of a planet near the outer rim of an average spiral galaxy that would have just the right characteristics to allow life. And again, that's a special case of the previous point, uh, that he knows how the universe is going to develop, or at least he could know that. And he could know how part of it, namely our planet Earth, would evolve and change and have everything set up from the beginning so that it would turn out with us. The next conclusion. He could have foreknowledge that that planet would lead to the development of sentient creatures through the mechanism of evolution by natural selection. Again, nothing terribly controversial here if we follow all the steps leading up to this. If the axiological argument is sound, for example, and everything in between leading up to this is right, it's a good argument, then yes, it's inescapable that this would be so. Now notice that this conclusion contradicts what I guess point 4 in Dawkins' argument. Evolution explains apparent design in biology. No, it doesn't. Well, it is a partial explanation, but because God exists and has foreknowledge, or could have foreknowledge, as Collins says here, um, God can use evolution. Um, and if he's the one who set everything up to evolve, then he certainly would be using it as a tool. Therefore, it does not nullify a supernatural explanation for design in biology simply because we have a natural explanation. And then the final conclusion, he could even know in advance the thoughts and actions of those creatures even though they themselves have free will. Um, creatures. And indeed, that we can agree with as well. At least I can. If we have free will, and if God has foreknowledge and he knows what we will freely choose, his knowledge of it is epistemological, it's not ontological. In other words, he's not causing us to freely choose things, he's allowing us to freely choose. And that was a problem not in the summary of the argument, but one of the things that Dawkins didn't like in the God delusion is this idea of free will and divine foreknowledge. So again, we see Collins disagreeing with Dawkins. So there's the argument and the conclusions. The conclusions are that various things in science, for example evolution, are compatible with religious belief. Stay tuned for the next part of this video. Bye.